This is a Blaze Radio production.
We're covering who's on deck,
hitting the ice on the hockey scene,
and hosting a racing roundtable.
This is sports.
This is news.
This is everything you need to know about the future.
This is the Scoutin Session.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome into a special edition of the Scoutin Session. My name is Noah Reed, as always, joined by Jordan Talley, Ella Walter-Sanchez, and today we got a very special guest, Kenna Mitchell. Kenna, thank you so much for joining the show today. Why don't you just really quickly tell everyone who's listening just a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What exactly do you do? And where were you about an hour ago?
My name is Kenna Mitchell. I'm from Loomis, California, and about an hour ago I was at the kart track doing some laps.
And how was that? What was on the docket today?
It was pretty good. It was a little cold out. Track was still a little bit wet from rain yesterday, and the pits had a lot of water in them, so trying to navigate around all that. But I mean, it was pretty good. I think it was still about a second off the pace because it was cold out, so it wasn't quite the same amount of grip as usual. But got some laps in. Like, seat time's always good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to kick this interview off with just a quick little icebreaker. And this is one thing I don't think I've actually had the chance to ask you before, but numbers are really important, especially in racing. They can, define a career, define a legacy. And so I want to ask you, what is special about your number? Why did you choose the number 7?
It's actually a funny story. My dad was originally 77 when he was in a modified. And when I started mini cups, I picked 77 too because I'm like, oh, well, it's my dad's number. I don't really have like a number yet. So when I moved up to bandoleros, we got a bandolero and it had number 7 on it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that works. So I just stuck with the number 7 from there.
Well, you touched on
number sevens.
Yeah, you touched on it right there that, your father, he raced modifieds, raced late models at All-American Speedway and a couple other tracks throughout California. Just take us back to that moment when you first realized that you kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps. What was that like?
I mean, we always went to his races, following him around California and a couple other states. And I was like, in between sports a few times, I was like, man, it'd be really fun to race. So when I turned 11, we got a mini cup and I started racing in that and moved up from there. But I mean, really was just my dad raced, I want to race, looks cool.
Okay, so then for like the fans at home, like walk them through what's it like for someone to jump into racing because it's, there's a lot you can do. There's a lot of different disciplines that you can jump into. You jumped into the bandolero side of things. What kind of things are you focusing on as you get your career going?
I mean, for us, it was really just, some seat time, going to a few different tracks. Like we went to Madera because they had a lot of mini cups and bandos there that were pretty competitive. And from there, I mean, it was really just doing laps. And when we moved up to junior late models, we also went back to like Madera. We went to, Madera and Roseville for my first couple of years, just, get some seat time. My first time ever in a late model was at Stockton. And I mean, it was so much fun driving like big car, from the little cars. And I mean, a lot of it's just with seat time, getting used to like the feel of the cars. I definitely think between mini cups and bandos, I liked the bandos more because they were all kind of like in the rear of the car. If you keep it like going straight, you got it pretty good.
I want to really quickly toss the time over just to our other co-host, Jordan, Ella. Do you guys have any questions so far?
What's
Oh, no, go ahead. You first.
you said there's bandos and mini cups? What's the difference and what are those?
Mini cups and bandos, they usually have them race together a lot of tracks I was at. Mini cups are really just like kind of mini version of like a cup car. And
Okay.
bandoleros are more like, I don't really know how to describe them. They have bumpers on the outside on both the front and the rear. So you could definitely do a lot more pushing. Like I remember doing that a lot, would be on the tail of someone, just push them down the straightaway. And so they're really not like that much different speed wise. Bandos are a little bit faster, but otherwise they're pretty similar besides just look.
That was my exact same question.
Well, on that topic, in 2019, you were competing in the Mini Cup Bandolero division at All-American Speedway. Had a fantastic battle with Trey Daniels, but you ultimately came away with your first ever track championship. Going back, what do you remember about that day?
Oh, that was my aunt got a great video of like I got bumped. got pushed to the outside, other car went down the inside, and then right into one and two, made a crossover right back over for the lead. That's like one of my favorite memories of Bandoleros was just there's so much, they're not fast, but they were so much fun just because the competition really was there when I first started, which I was glad because you don't see as many nowadays, but I was started to see pickups in like the other series I run. We start seeing more bandos. I'm like, that was my favorite series to start in just because there was good competition. I mean, we had a great battle all year, like going into the last race, we were tied in points. I think I got the qualifying. I was like, I just need to get qualifying in the race, and we have it solid.
And then, fast forward a few years later, you're turning heads at Madera, becoming the third female ever to podium at the track. And then at Roseville, you claimed your first ever junior late model title. By 2022, you're the youngest driver to win pro late model race at All American. What was that period of time at your life navigating through both high school and racing?
It was pretty busy. I mean, I did online for my first 3 years of high school just because it was easier with racing, travel and stuff. Because when I was doing racing, when I was in like seventh and eighth grade, I'd miss Thursdays, Fridays, stuff like that. Making up the work was not terrible, but it's still kind of like, man, this sucks. Be at the racetrack, got to do homework while I'm here. And then in high school, I was like, I'm gonna do online just because then I could work ahead, or if I got behind, it was pretty easy to catch up. So, but for my final year of high school, I was like, I want to go to like be in person, actually get to like meet people and stuff. And I mean, it was pretty fun. I took less classes because it just made easier schedule wise. I could leave early on a Friday and not really have to worry because like my last class would be like culinary or something like that. But ultimately, it was just a lot of like balancing it, knowing like I can't get a lot of Thursday practices and not mornings on Fridays just because I have to focus on school as well and graduate before I can go fully into racing.
I mean, 2024 was your breakout season. You swept the pro late model and the super late model championships for the first time since Dylan Zampa did it. Going back to the summer, you got a pretty cool story behind a pair of wins. I want you to tell everyone what happened during your high school graduation.
Uh, well, that morning we were I had my graduation. We got there and I was like, man, it's pretty crazy. I'm graduating high school. Like it just felt so weird. And then that night, it was like straight from graduation right to the racetrack. Got there just in time for the drivers' meeting, and then practiced pretty well, qualified good, and I mean, won the pro late model race. I'm like, man, it'd be kind of crazy if we won both races the same night I graduated. Got to the super race, going good. Got to the lead. I'm like, man, I might actually do it. I might be able to win two races and graduate in the same night. Took the win. I was like, that's so crazy that I graduated, which we didn't know was going to be on a Saturday at first. We're like, oh, it might be on a Friday or something. Nope, it's on the Saturday. So go graduation, pro win, super win, just felt great. It was so cool.
That's crazy. That must have just felt like awesome to like, accomplish some big milestone in
Mhm.
school and then go on and win two big races. So that I just can only imagine.
It was definitely a great start to the year at Roseville.
And that great start got recognized by a lot of news outlets. You and fellow driver Kylie Glick featured on Fox 40 News, both at the local and the national level. How does it feel to be recognized by so many people for the hard work that both you and the team have put into your career?
I mean, definitely coming from like mini cups, bandos, going to late models, never really felt like, oh, it's never going to be like that big or anything. But to keep moving up and then going on like, national news is really crazy, especially for like me and my crew chief George. He's been with me since mini cups, like day one. And so being like, wow, we've made it this far. We're on the news. It was very weird to be like, this is actually happening.
I actually do want to take a quick sidestep from some of the questions. I've had the opportunity to go to your shop, so I kind of know what it looks like. But talk about what exactly goes into prepping not just a pro late model, but a super late model, and some of the stuff that you and your team do.
I mean, a lot of it is really like prepping for the track, depending on where we're going. We've only really raced supers at Roseville, and this last year on the extravaganza for Irwindale was like the first and only time I got to race supers there. And I mean, that meant a lot to us because we were like, we're never gonna get race supers there if we don't do this now. So, I mean, that was a lot of prep work because we were built for that short track. We have less power than everyone else. So going to a big track, it was a lot of prep to get that ready. And we've also raced supers once at Shasta. That was a lot of fun too. But going from our little, like, our little track to a bigger track, it was like, oh, gotta get this car ready for this. And then, I mean, same thing for pros, just a lot of prep work, getting stuff ready, moving cars around, and like getting things just ready to go for a weekend, even if depending on it's like Roseville, Kern, everywhere else we're racing this year.
I mean, you touched on it right there. You had your chance to make the inaugural Cars Tour West debut. You're now racing at different tracks like Kern County, like All American, Stockton, Madera potentially, different tracks across the West Coast, like Havasu 95. The Las Vegas Bull Ring just had their race last weekend. What does it mean to you now and the sport to having a growing unification of late model races across the West Coast?
I mean, it's super cool to see, like especially if like the rules start becoming like straightforward across all tracks. Like I think it's really cool just because it kind of like brings everyone together. We've raced like, a few different tracks and through series just by themselves going to, and like I've raced, I think, or no, my dad's raced in Havasu. I think I've also raced Bandos there a few years ago. So being able to be like, man, I might be racing late models there would be really just cool because I know I thought that track was really fun. But to kind of like start seeing like yeah, that unison across all the tracks on the West Coast is really cool.
And then when I spoke to you kind of last year, you said that the goal was to learn as much as possible for competing full time in the Cars Tour West. I want to ask, like, how do you feel about that preparation ahead of the 2025 season? What are the goals? What are the expectations for you?
I mean, we want to do well at every race we show up to. Like a lot of like just getting ready for the tracks, taking notes. I mean, our biggest struggle last year was Curran. We just didn't have the notes for it. So going into this year, we're like, we want to keep taking notes, get better, know what we're going into. Like beginning of the year, end of the year, it's colder. We know it's going to be probably a tighter car, but Kern is always kind of a little like little funky. It's kind of like Roseville. You got two different corners, like 3 and 4 got a lot of banking. You can really make the car work, and 1 and 2 is just a short little like less banking, just short little turn. And so I know we have a lot of fun there, but it's like same thing at Kern's kind of 1 and 2, you got like you can have a big open arc, and then 3 and 4 is really if you don't make that line right, you're not going to make the corner at all. So kind of getting those notes for how do we set up the car to deal with this. Like one race last year at Kern, I think it was the last race for the Cars Tour West was, man, 3 and 4 really sucks right now. Just in the race, not a whole lot you can do to fix it, but it's just staying on the line, getting notes for the next race and come back stronger.
Well, that brings me to kind of my next question actually, and like on the topic of like that preparation that goes into, setting up the car, what kind of work goes into being a successful race team from your perspective as the driver? But then, I know you kind of touched on what the team does throughout the week, but these are guys who their full-time job is not to work on race cars. They have other jobs throughout the week and they're meeting up, like you said, Thursday, Friday, Saturday to ultimately create a winning program.
I mean, yeah, it's just a lot of late nights at the shop sometimes. We had like one night last year where it was like 2 in the morning putting a motor in the car. And I mean, now it's really just a lot of like getting a list. What we need to do on the cars. We've finally got like a solid like to-do list. We slap that on the car and like, okay, we need to check this, we need to change this. We want to check and make sure this is all still running right. And stuff like that just to keep like what's like what would you call it? Kind of I can't think of the word, but it's just like the have an order of doing things and get it done like the same way each time for all the cars. Because not all the cars are the same. We got two port cities and then we got a couple ham keys, and they're not quite the same across all of them. Like our port cities are definitely a lot older. So they sometimes like gotta make sure everything's on there correctly and stuff like that.
Ella, Jordan, do you guys have any more questions so far?
Just listening here.
I think it's kind of a little off topic, but you talked about it earlier. We always talk about, young athletes and stuff like that. And like probably the biggest thing I'm amazed with is like the social sacrifices you make. You talked about
Mm.
graduation a little bit. And how has that been kind of because obviously you're doing something that you love, but there's also that, disappointment or maybe even FOMO missing out on like certain things. So how has that been, especially since you're our age essentially, and it's a very different life than the typical, teenager.
It's definitely a lot less. Like I didn't go to a whole lot of like the school functions and stuff. And I mean, I still have two great friends. We hang out all the time. And like we went to the senior ball, the three of us together. I mean, but for me, it was really a lot less like I want to go to these things, more of like I want to go with my friends to like a couple things. But most of the time, I mean, it's not really something I feel like I'm missing out on. Like, there's a few things like the senior sunrise, senior sunset. I didn't go to because I was like, I didn't really have like friends as much at my school. I was like, I want to focus on racing. Like I have, my friends who I enjoy spending time with, and I wasn't like too concerned with, oh, I don't want to miss this. I was like, I gotta race this weekend. I'm so excited.
That is awesome though, because I feel like sometimes you're if you're really passionate about racing and you really love what you do, that's obviously like one of the main like barriers there is because there's some athletes who have that and then they get older and they're like, oh, I should have done this or this or this. So it's really cool that you have that love and passion for the sport so you don't have to feel like that, you know?
Mhm.
Well, and then I want to ask you this one too, is like when you go to the racetrack, I always kind of chalk racing up as like we're all one big family, from everyone who works the track crew to all of the different crews, the drivers. Like, I'm curious, like, would you say who would be like your best friend if you have one at the track, or who are you hanging out with like mostly on the race weekends when you're outside of, the car?
I mean, a lot of times, just my crew and stuff, but at the when we have races that are together, I know Holly Clark pretty well. We went and saw one of the NASCAR races at Sonoma together last year. And I mean, most of the time, just kind of sitting with the crew, hanging out. Sometimes my friends will come out to Roseville races. But I mean, a lot of the competitors, like I feel like have pretty good, like, know them. Like last year, John Moore, it was a lot of fun racing against him, like, kind of like getting into it, bumping a little bit. Same thing, Cole Moore. Like, I know he doesn't want to get beat by me. He'll might drive me a little bit rougher, but I know I can get by him just because, it's very fun.
I mean, that was actually another one of the questions was going to be about kind of having that respect of John Moore. We call him the Iron Man because he's been one of the longest tenured drivers. He's the only guy I know who can flip a late model, jump out of the car, climb on top, and still celebrate in front of the fans. Like, what does it mean to you to have gained the respect of all of your competitors?
I mean, it means a lot to me, especially like kind of being, I want to race as clean as I can. I don't really like bumping people. Like I'll give them a little bit of a like nose, but I want to race clean and being able to earn the respect of my competitors is really cool, especially racing against people like John Moore and Eric Schmidt. And, it's just, it just means a lot to me to be able to like race with people that have been like so much into racing and been racing for so long.
I mean, it's just so cool. And we've actually, I forgot to say this earlier, but we've actually shouted out Holly on this show before. And just another one of the great young drivers who's like, we're excited to keep following. And one of the things that you guys both have in common is social media presence. I want to ask you, like, how difficult is it to maintain a strong social media presence and then build and maintain relationships with sponsors?
I mean, for me, I never really liked social media. Like, if I didn't do racing, I probably wouldn't be on it like much, just because it's like it's a lot being like, gotta plan how I want to do things. I want to like on a weekend. Sometimes my dad would be like, "Oh, hey, don't forget to throw your GoPro in your car," and getting footage and all sorts of stuff. Like, it's fun. I do enjoy making reels and things, and like the clips I've made for YouTube, and like kind of putting it all together to be interesting. My main thing I struggle with is kind of like the day-to-day sort of like posting, keep people up to date, just because I'm like, I know I probably have interesting things going on, but it's very weird to post about it for other people. Like Holly does a great job with that. Like when we went to Sonoma, she had like good ideas for like post and reel and all sorts of stuff. And I'm just like, man, I really want to get to that kind of level of I know what I'm doing on this.
Jordan, Ella, I'm going to keep going back to you guys. What are your thoughts? What do you think?
mean, yeah. I mean, I just can like social media is like would be hard for just me and I don't have a brand to keep up. So like I could only imagine, especially how young you are. Like that's just got to be like not like draining, but it's like okay, here we go again, especially like having to do it every day.
Mhm.
I know a lot of the people we've talked about on this podcast have had like um their family members as part of their crew, and I know that you talked about your dad racing. Do you have any family members that are part of your crew at all? or is it just people you're close with?
I mean, my dad, he does a lot on the like weekends and leading up to that, and he like works hard. And my mom, she comes out to support me at a lot of the races. My sister, she doesn't really like coming out because she's not like super into racing, but it's still pretty cool. She sometimes bring her friends and stuff out, and just having kind of like my family's support means a lot to me.
I'm curious, what is, the best piece of racing advice that you've got from your dad?
I mean, don't be nice. That's what he always says.
Ooh.
I think I'm sometimes a little too nice. Like we've had some times where it's like some dude will spin me and they'll be like, hey, get him back, Don't let him just get away with that. I'm like, I can't do it, man. I don't want to wreck someone, wreck myself. I mean, never really had that happen. Sometimes with my crew, my dad, he'll get a little bit angry, but I'm like, that's just not how I race. I like racing clean, little bit of bumps here and there. I mean, I've had a couple times where I'm like, oh, hit that guy a little too hard, but I mean, a lot of it is definitely my dad's like, don't be nice. You gotta like that's how you earn respect, especially in like legends and stuff. Like those guys, they're bumping all the time. Like you're gonna earn respect by not being nice.
Mhm.
I mean, that's one of the things up in the booth that we praise you about is that clean driving. You can get by people without using the bumper, without using that chrome horn. But I'm curious now, take us inside the driver's seat. Like when you were racing tight confines of these bull rings, you're, side by side, inches apart. For all the people who don't know what that's like, can you kind of describe what it feels to be going flying on down into the corner, heavy braking, and then like what is that experience like?
I mean, for me, it's really like, it's a lot of adrenaline, kind of being like, oh man, am I gonna make this? I mean, my fastest laps are usually like, am I gonna make the corner? I don't think I'm gonna make the corner, and then making the corner. I mean, being side by side with people is always, how close can I get to this guy before I touch his door? Had a couple of races where it's like, you got donuts down your whole door because you're like, oh, a little too close there. I mean, my favorite races are always the ones where it's like running side by side, lap after lap after lap, just because you never know, is this guy gonna go up a little too high? Am I gonna have to get closer to the wall? And I mean, my favorite race this last year was a racing against Cole Moore and getting such a perfect crossover lined up. Like, it just feels so like cool to be able to like, I'm doing this. I'm making this corner. I'm gonna get past this guy and just flying past him. I mean, I didn't realize, but at Kern, we're going like 110 miles an hour. It doesn't feel that fast when you're in the car just because everything feels slower. And then someone goes, oh, yeah, you're going like 112. I'm like, really? It's not like it feels so controlled, but so out of control at the same time.
That's crazy.
Would you, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead. That's
Would
crazy.
Would you say, I mean, this is going to sound like a kind of cliche question, but would you say that the appeal in racing and what makes you love it so much is that adrenaline and like the need for speed and how you feel the feeling in the car as you're driving these crazy speeds? Like you said, you don't know if you're going to make the turn or whatever, and then you do. Is that a part of the appeal?
I mean, I definitely say so, being able to go like, oh, I drive 110 miles an hour in a circle. I mean, the fastest I've gone is actually in a legend car in Vegas and the road course they had there. We go 119 miles an hour or faster on the backstretch. I didn't know that until I looked at the GoPro GPS speed. I was like, it does not feel like that until you miss the corner and you're flying off in the gravel. Then it kind of feels like you're going a little fast. I mean, to me, the biggest thing in racing, like the reason I like doing it is both the adrenaline and just the competition. I love like
Mm,
races that are side by side, passes, battling back and forth. Like that's always like my favorite part.
awesome.
Hey, well, two things. You touched on the competition and you touched on Kern County Raceway. I believe, I want to clarify, your next race is going to be March 15th at Kern, correct?
Yep.
How are you feeling about the season opener? And I believe there's going to be some really special competition at the event. Kevin Harvick, Keelan Harvick making their races. Are you planning on competing against them at all, or is it just gonna? I wasn't clear. I wasn't positive. What's the plan
I
there?
believe if we can get it to come together, we are going to race both the classes. We're going to race in supers too, which is I'm excited for because never raced a super there, but we just kind of got to get like the transportation stuff figured out for that race.
Okay. How are you, I mean, if that were to all come true, like you're racing against Kevin Harvick, like did you ever think, 5 years ago that you would be able to get to say like, hey, I'm racing against NASCAR Hall of Famer Kevin Harvick at his own racetrack?
I mean, definitely never thought of it. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna do this for a few years. This is really fun. Now it's like, man, that's crazy. The kind of people you race against, especially in like the super, is gonna be. I mean, it's gonna be super cool. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about.
I mean, like Kern is such a unique racetrack in the sense that it goes down almost like you're driving into a bowl. What do you feel as a driver when you're going into the corners at Kern?
I mean, I've done, fair bit of laps on there this year. I think we have like few hundred so far this year. Or no, it might be a little less than that, but just the feel of that track, I definitely feel it through the car more. Like at Roseville, I have so many laps there, it's kind of like I don't really feel it as much. Like I know what the track's gonna do, I know how it turns, but current's still kind of getting used to that track. I just can feel it through the car. The banking on the back straightaway, it's really like kind of weird feeling if you're going slow, you can kind of feel your car start to get pulled down. And I got them in scrubbing tires there, and like I could just feel like I turn down, it's fine, turn back up, and the skirt drags ground a little bit. But I mean, it's a lot of it's like just it's such a like wide track, and you really feel it when you get in the corners, like into that banking, and even walking on the apron, and looking at the track. It's like, man, I've touched that apron before during a race. Car gets tight. I'm like, I need to be able to make this corner, touch the apron, it turns the car. It's such a cool track.
I mean, you said 100 laps at least there. I mean, you posted on social media, I would say maybe 2 weeks ago, about all the stuff that you've been doing, hundreds of laps on the sim. Like, how, like, does the sim truly translate to what you are doing in the car?
I don't think exactly right. Like really depends on if the setup's right in the car because on the sim, like their stock late model in iRacing isn't the same as what we're racing. So like on the sim, it definitely feels more heavy, kind of in the wheel. I can definitely feel like it feels similar. The track, like it's crazy how like accurate it is to the track. Like going on there, and I'm like wow, it really feels like current. But the line's a little bit different. I think it definitely helps though. I mean, we ran on the sim a little bit like before the previous race and stuff, and it's like it helps remember the track. Because you go 6 weeks without racing and it's where am I again? Being on the sim is definitely helpful in the sense of like, oh, that's just how this corner works. Because it works the same way as the track too. It's not like entirely different. Like if you like on the real track, you miss 3 and 4, it really punishes you. It's gonna suck getting off the corner. On the sim, same thing. You miss that corner, and well, there comes the wall.
Well, and as we get ready to close today, I just want to ask you like what you've learned from racing. What's the most important thing that this sport has taught you?
I mean, definitely perseverance. I mean, we've had races like I think one of like my favorite races in a super so far has also been in Shasta. It was like good weekend going, pretty fast, had found a line that worked for us and nobody else really seemed to be running it. Qualified, I think second fastest, started outside pole. We got I think 5 laps into the race and then under yellow my throttle cable came undone and I was like, uh-oh, what do we do about this? I got into the hot pits. One of my guys dove into the car. I don't know how he found all the pieces, but he put it back together, got back out on track, and they put me a lap down. But I mean, it made sense going out in front of the whole field of cars. Probably not the safest idea. I was like, okay, well, they probably have Lucky Dog. They didn't have Lucky Dog. So it's like, got to make up my entire lap by myself. But I feel like I learned so much and had so much fun just trying to persevere, get through all the cars. I passed the same cars like 10 times, finally started making up laps or making up spots when other cars went down laps. And I got closer and closer to the front. Ultimately ended up sixth because by the time I got to the guy at the front, yellow came out. Like the last 20 laps were yellow after yellow. And I was like, man, this sucks. But I've had so much fun just being able to do so much passing in a night where if I had just been out front, I probably would have just been lapping cars. It wouldn't have been as fun as it was being able to pass same guy over and over again and eventually be like, oh yeah, this guy's just gonna let me by. He doesn't want to deal with it anymore.
Jordan, Ella, you guys got any final questions for Kenna?
I'm just ease my curious mind here. Can you take us through like a race day? Like any superstitions, any like certain routines you have to do to make sure you have a good day in the car?
I mean, at Roseville, it's definitely like a throw on the music I like, drive out to the track, find like somewhere to park. And I mean, I love the community at Roseville. It's so cool being able like knowing a lot of like the officials there and be like, hey, how's it going? How you doing? During the summer there, pretty hot. It's a lot of I want to stay in the trail. I don't want to go outside. But I mean, before race, I mean, a lot of it's just talking to like my crew, like what's the game plan, how we want to like do this. Like some racer where we want to start on higher tire pressure, lower tire pressure. Like we get halfway through the race, what are we thinking about? I mean, a lot of it's just really like thinking about the race. Qualifying, like I want to qualify good, but ultimately I want to have a long run car. I want to be able to pass people when we get 30 laps into a run. I mean, a lot of it's really like kind of, I don't really know how to describe it, is just getting in that mindset, and being ready for the race, knowing I don't know what's going to happen in this race. Might have the entire field wreck in front of us, or we might have whole green straight through.
Nice.
I don't have any further questions, but just wanted to say thank you for joining us. This has
Yeah,
been
thank
so
you for having
interesting
me.
to learn about, especially as somebody that doesn't know that much about racing. It's always cool when we get to talk to people like you.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And thanks to all the listeners for tuning into the special edition of the Scoutin Session. Again, you catch us on Wednesdays at 2:30 p.m. on Blaze Radio, blazeradio.com. Again, this is the Scoutin Session. Jordan Talley, Ella Walter Sanchez. We got the Racing Roundtable. We've got Hit the Ice, and we've got Who's on Deck. It's going to be a blast, and we can't wait to see you all again. Thank you guys so much.